Now to North Korea, a nation that has nuclear weapons and is tonight threatening to use them against the United States.
It's absolutely terrifying to think that the world is being held hostage by an unqualified, thin-skinned tyrant with little diplomatic experience who has access to an arsenal of nuclear weapons. A tyrant who exercises poor choices in not only his threatening words, but also in something as simple as hairstyle. I am, of course, referring to Donald Trump. Seriously, Donald, you have access to every barber in the country.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
This is our baby tyrant mirroring the language of the large adult son tyrant Kim Jong-un in the Mexican standoff of a lifetime. Even though this was the same Donald who praised Un only a year ago.
He's like a maniac, and you gotta give him credit. He goes in, he takes over, and he's the boss.
Yeah, you know how he did that? By executing even the faintest dissenting voice, like his uncle. That's how he was able to capture power, Saddam style, with sheer brutality. And that's the person whose rhetoric we're mirroring here. And that's terrifying. But while Donald may have improvised this statement in an effort to appeal to his most loyal supporters like a UCB graduate, the sentiment behind our approach is carefully put together. And that is also terrifying. On one hand, we have Rex Tillerson, the crony capitalist who's now the voice of reason, trying to de-escalate tensions, and then on the other, we have Mattis banging war drums. But the only certainty is that Donald Trump is gambling with the lives of thousands of Americans and millions of others living in South Korea and Japan, on the 72nd anniversary of Nagasaki, mind you. You know, the last time we rained fire and fury on another country to show the world our powers, and it was unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Now look, we could very well turn the North Korean capital, Pyongyang, into a giant fucking crater. But even with swift, effective military strikes and a potential decapitation, North Korea would rain down terror on the region, especially on South Korea with artillery and conventional weapons, or with missile strikes on the island of Japan.
At the sound of the siren, children hit the deck and wait for further instruction. This is a drill, a loudspeaker announces. A missile has been launched.
But even with casualties potentially reaching into the millions, the aftermath of the destruction poses an even greater danger. In the resulting North Korean power vacuum, who knows what maniacal general or family member is going to be able to seize control of the nuclear weapons. While a maniac we're familiar with is scary enough, an unfamiliar maniac is potentially catastrophic. Like Dennis Rodman. What if Dennis Rodman took control over the Democratic People's Republic? Just imagine that.
Literally, dude. I'm like, oh, blood everywhere. I mean, blood everywhere.
Donald Trump is forcing North Korea into a corner, but the reality is that Trump, possibly on the advice of his generals, is actually forcing China into a corner. The only reason North Korea is able to exist as a hostile state with nuclear warheads is because China continues to supply the country, controlling 85% of its trade and frequently flouting UN sanctions. However, China also doesn't want to start a war in the region. For starters, they'd be responsible for millions of refugees fleeing over the border, and no one wants that. And they would also lose their gambit fail-son state North Korea, which currently is a buffer between America and China. But while the Chinese government may be uncomfortable with the North's cries of glowing war, at least they understand what we Americans fail to grasp. North Korea will never give up their nuclear arsenal, because they've learned from the mistakes of Gaddafi's regime in Libya. Giving up their nuclear weapons means inevitable sodomy at the end of a bayonet for Kim Jong-un. So North Korea's nuclear program is literally Kim Jong-un's way of protecting his ass. He's trying to preserve his ability to exploit millions of North Korean citizens while reaping billions of dollars for himself, mostly to fuel his fancy cheese addiction. And I get that. Cheese is delicious. Not Swiss cheese, though. That means you're a sociopath. Anyway, DM me your top 3 cheeses, Kim, you cheese dick.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is putting his health at serious risk due to dangerously high consumption of cheese.
Short of Un committing suicide because he lost access to his beloved cheeses, the current sanctions placed on North Korea are not going to work. Our world leaders are giddy about taking away $1 billion away from a country that has a GDP of $28 billion. Mainstream media is calling this the harshest sanctions ever levied by the UN, but that's like getting one Bill O'Reilly off of Fox News. There's like 40 other old white pathological dick pic senders that will gladly take his place. Plus, agreeing on sanctions doesn't even guarantee compliance. The Kim's regime is notorious for committing identity fraud and setting up complex networks of front companies to do their illicit dealings. China knows this, the UN knows this, and our generals know it too.
Pyongyang is also reported to be evading financial sanctions by still being active in global financial markets through a vast network of Chinese-based front companies.
Trump's asinine rhetoric about how he's going to unleash fury on North Korea is misguided and unnecessarily escalates the tension. It's an obvious pander to his base at the expense of global stability, and also conveniently drives from the front page of stories about his illicit dealings with Russia. The sanctions so far are also pointless because they cannot be effectively enforced, but on the other hand, we can't just drop nukes because we aren't trying to fuck over our allies with radioactive fallout. At this point, our only hope may be that the instructions for pushing the red button are longer than one page and smooth-brained President Trump can't get all the way through them. I'm Hasan Piker. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at HasanDPiker and on Twitter at HasanTheHun. Please like and share this video, and don't forget to follow TYT on Facebook. And this has been The Breakdown.